Well, welcome back, everyone. For this last plenary of the day, we wanted to focus on sustainable development goals, and we also wanted to provide an opportunity for some of our partners on islands around the world in the Pacific to bring some of their ideas on sustainable development to this to our program. And I would like to introduce the moderator for the upcoming plenary, Celeste Connors. She's the Executive Director of Hawaii Green Growth. And Celeste, if you're there, go ahead and the floor is yours.
Aloha from Hawaii, and thank you so much for the introduction, and really congratulations on a wonderful two-day event with just such rich conversations that we've all benefited from, and really honored to be able to moderate this, I think, final panel session and to introduce our speakers. Again, my name is Celeste Connors, and I'm the CEO of Hawaii Local 2030 Hub. And this is the plenary session 7 on sustainable development goals. I mentioned I did grow up in Hawaii, and I had previously served as the Director for Environment and Climate Change at the White House National Security Council, where I helped to coordinate climate, energy, and environment policy across federal agencies, including on the sustainable development goals. And so I'm delighted to be able to maybe share again the video that some of you might have seen in the previous breakout session, which we'll come back to again, about the SDGs and the US commitment to that. So if I could just ask our colleagues to kick us off with that video, again, for the benefit of everybody in the plenary, and then we'll get started with our moderated discussion. Thank you.
The United Nations General Assembly was the scene of a celebration in 2015, when 193 member countries adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a unanimous commitment to end poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change.
We need action from everyone, everywhere. 17 Sustainable Development Goals are our guide. They are a to-do list for people and planet, and the blueprint for success.
The SDGs are an agenda to balance human prosperity with protecting the planet.
Imagine there's no countries.
UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Shakira asked global leaders to imagine a world where we achieve the goals by 2030. While fellow UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Angelique Kidjo underscored a focus on Africa and developing countries. But the universal agenda is important to all nations, as leaders from developed countries also pledged to make the goals a reality.
Poverty, growing inequality exists in all of our nations, and all of our nations have work to do, and that includes here in the United States. And that's why today I am committing the United States to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Sustainable Development Goals build on the success of another 15-year plan. Created in the year 2000, the Millennium Development Goals sunset at the end of 2015. The MDGs halved extreme poverty, achieved equal primary education for girls and boys, and dropped HIV infection by 40%, among many successes. The SDGs go beyond the MDGs by improving the lives of everyone, everywhere, and create a better world for future generations.
Today, we are 193 young people representing billions more.
The youngest Nobel Peace Laureate, Malala, calls on world leaders to keep their promise to every child.
Each lantern we hold represents the hope we have for our future because of the commitments you have made to the global goals.
And Pope Francis advised world leaders to put humanity and the environment over politics.
Los gobernantes han de hacer todo lo posible a fin de que todos puedan tener la mínima base material y espiritual para ejercer su dignidad y para formar y mantener una familia.
193 nations unanimously committed to the Sustainable Development Goals.
It is so decided.
But the journey starts here. Now's the time to take global action for local results and move our people and planet towards a sustainable future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that very moving and relevant video. And it was also great to hear from our former president, who is also an island leader or self-described island boy, as he mentioned in the COP event that Ricardo cited earlier. These are the SDGs. So during the past few days, we have discussed climate change, impacts in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, rising sea levels, coastal management, vulnerability, public health issues, food security challenges, and environmental justice. We've also talked about regenerative tourism and disaster resilience and nature-based solutions. These are the SDGs. These are the challenges that we face across our economies, and particularly in island economy setting. So as we know, according to the IPCC report, we're going to need drastic behavior change across every sector of our society to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. But also in that report points to the SDGs as a pathway forward, a framework for action that actually helps us see the opportunities in between the goals, the 17 SDGs that we're committed to achieve. In the previous breakout session, we heard from colleagues from the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and they discussed the importance of partnerships and community engagement and actually measuring progress, that we need to see resilience and climate change action that moves beyond short-term political cycles and that is inclusive and involves the community broadly. In Hawaii, as an example, we released in 2020 the Voluntary Local Review. And this is measuring 6 years of data that's tracked on a dashboard that are community driven. And a process has been developed to develop short-term consensus around long-term goals, which is actually difficult, and what we heard from a lot of our colleagues earlier today. And we actually have the dashboard now that provides transparency and accountability and is actually available, constantly updating the data and measuring what matters most to the community. And this is the conversation that we're going to have today with our 3 panelists that are actually working every day at the local, state, and global level, serving their communities and working to put islands at the forefront of the solutions to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And so with that, it's now my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Austin Shelton with Guam Green Growth. And I'm going to kick you off, Austin, with the first question, and then we're going to go to, after you, to Mayor Roth from Hawaii Island, and after Mayor Roth to Kate Brown, who's Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership. So Austin, with the first question for you, and this is the question we'll ask all the panelists, are what are some examples in your island of island-led sustainability solutions and bright spots that are helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, especially in the context of climate resilience and equity? Aloha, Austin, over to you.
Thank you, Celeste, and half a day, everybody from Guam. It's a pleasure to be here on your conference with you today. Before I answer Celeste's question with just a few pictures of what we're doing here in Guam, I just want to make sure that everybody's seeing my correct screen. I don't have to swap displays. Looks good?
Looks good. Thanks, Austin.
Okay, thank you. All right, so a few years ago, in 2019, Celeste Connors from Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Hub, and also Kate Brown, who you'll hear from on the panel soon, from the Global Island Partnership, invited us to be part of this amazing network of islands implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, and become to start our own green growth movement in Guam, because we were watching all the fantastic work that and progress that Hawaii was able to make with Hawaii Green Growth. And so we got invited to join Hawaii and other islands from around the world at the United Nations General Assembly in 2019 to commit our island to implementing the goals in locally and culturally effective ways. And so that took leadership from our governor and lieutenant governor And after going to the United Nations, we came back home, and this is how we got started. The governor appointed 100 members to a working group from all sectors of our society to start thinking about how we would implement them in locally and culturally effective ways. And so this was the picture of that kickoff that happened in early 2020 after we figured out the plan coming back home from the United Nations. And so we got working before and during the pandemic when we first got started, and we put together a very comprehensive plan by September 2020 was the first version of the Guam Green Growth Action Framework. So we have hundreds of different goals and action items and team leads, and this document is what guides us forward. And for my role at the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grant, we are assigned to facilitate the island-wide initiative. So we help with ensuring that the working group and the steering committee are meeting on a monthly basis. So the governor of Guam, Lulian Guerrero, and University of Guam President Thomas Christ are the main co-chairs. And then I co-chair the steering committee with Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio. And the way that we set it up for our plan was to put the sustainable development goals in these clusters, such as healthy and prosperous communities, educated, capable, and compassionate island, thriving natural resources, and more. And I just want to show you through a few slides here, the ways that we are implementing the sustainable development goals in locally and culturally effective ways. It's really not about, when we first met with Hawaii, what was really encouraging about implementing the sustainable development goals that we learned from Celeste and her team was that it's not something that the United Nations is dictating to us in islands, that we are doing amazing work already, and that this is an opportunity to align all of our important sustainable local actions and to demonstrate that we're contributing to global impact. And I think that's what we heard in the video a little bit ago. So food security is one area that's an example that we're doing that focuses on zero hunger, good health, and well-being. So those are goals 2 and 3, and several more as well. So what we did is open up 2 community gardens in Guam. Our first one was opened in August of last year. We held a ground raising event because we added soil to the ground. We didn't dig in, but this is a new community garden right across the Guam legislature and the Agana post office and Guam Museum. So it's in a really nice visible spot. And now it's an active place where we have an AmeriCorps program running the tending to the garden. We have activities for children and community groups every week. So it's a really great beacon of hope for food security and education. And this is a conservation corps that I'll tell you a little bit more in just a minute, but they've recently doubled the size of the garden. And this is a second one in the village of Talafofo that we got started on Martin Luther King Day earlier this year with a different AmeriCorps group, the Vet Corps group. And we're also working on food security projects through aquaculture. So we're putting aquaponics systems through several community groups, and these are also serving as education hubs where other homeowners or community groups can learn how to set up their own aquaponics systems wherever they're at. Another area that we're working in is thriving natural resources. Focusing on climate action, life below water, and life on land. Those are 13, 14, and 15 SDGs. So I know there's similar issues in the Caribbean with watershed degradation issues from poor land use practices and other causes. So we're trying to keep the soil off of our coral reefs as well. And we're doing lots of things like planting trees and installing sediment filters. And the most recent innovation that we've been using are drone technology to drop seeds into hard to reach places. Another example is our workforce development program. Early on in the Biden administration, we heard about the idea of the climate corps. And so we wanted to get a head start and sort of start our own Conservation Corps. So we called it the Guam Green Growth Conservation Corps. We're now in our second cohort where we're training 12 individuals at a time for full-time 5-month workforce development programs with training in agriculture, watershed restoration, removal of invasive species, getting ready for more renewable energy opportunities because we recently passed a law for 100% renewable energy by 2045. And we're doing lots of recycling and island beautification and cleanup events. And the great thing about the G3 Conservation Corps is that they move village to village. So once a week, at least they're doing a cleanup with a different village mayor. And we're bringing volunteers along the way to be part of the sustainability movement island-wide. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the panel, but we're tracking many of the action items in the Conservation Corps and these other activities, like Celeste mentioned. So there's some incredible numbers that we got just in the first few months of this program, like installing recycling 70,000 aluminum cans and taking those redemption amounts back to local schools so that they're seeing the benefits of this effort. We're also doing things like installing 641 solar panels, for example. Then another exciting area that we're working on is the circular economy. So we're trying to solve our issue in Guam, which I know other islands are working on the same issue. We import over 90% of the food and goods we consume. And then our solution in Guam is to dig holes and fill it with trash. And we know we're going to run out of space if we keep using this model for waste management. So a tangible way that we have helped with this is to create the G3 Circular Economy Makerspace and Innovation Hub at this place called the Chamorro Village in our capital village of Hagåtña. And we now have a place with power tools, 3D printers, CNC routers, laser cutters, small hand tools, and even precious plastic machines so that we can invite entrepreneurs and artisans to come into the space and create new marketable products out of waste. And we also have business development resources from the Small Business Development Center and Guam Economic Development Authority, where we can walk entrepreneurs through the process of creating new businesses and stimulating new green industries. And it doesn't have to be held to just this one space in the makerspace, but we can also go out with our Conservation Corps and other partners, harvest invasive species like the chain of love, and hold workshops and inspire action to make things like bath bombs or clothing dye. We're also removing invasive bamboo from our rivers and bringing that back to the makerspace to do vases and purses and instruments, whatever they can create. And then our entrepreneurs can put them into the G3 demonstration store where they can sell them on consignment, test the market, and then hopefully get so successful that they leave us and move into the other retail vacancies around the island to start their own business. And lastly, I just wanted to share one more example on quality education, SDG number 4. This is a capacity building project that we're doing in partnership with islands in Micronesia, but also in the US Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We have the Seas Islands Alliance that's funded by the National Science Foundation. And we're offering now hundreds of opportunities for Islander students to get training in marine, environmental, and sustainability sciences. And we're tracking all of these opportunities as well through our work. So those are just a few of the implementation projects I wanted to share. Thank you for that time.
Mahalo nui, Austin. It's so exciting to see all the work underway in Guam. And actually, Mayor Mitch Roth, who I'll introduce in just a moment, and I had the opportunity to visit you and your colleagues in Guam recently, actually this past week, and really got to see all the great work happening on the ground, the dynamic partnerships, the actual solutions that are being developed. And so really just want to congratulate you and your work, and also your leadership of the governor and the lieutenant governor that have really taken this on to support the Guam Green Growth Partnership. And we're actually seeing the real solutions emerge in the island context. So thank you. And
Thank you.
Before I hand it over to Mayor Roth, I do want to remind folks that please colleagues in the audience, please feel free to put questions into the chat or use the chat box liberally for any questions and comments that you have, and our colleagues are going to try to capture that as we move into the moderated session. But with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Hawaii Island Mayor Mitch Roth. And very early in his term, the mayor actually announced that sustainability was a priority for him and for his administration. And he launched the County of Hawaii Sustainability Summit, again, focused on very specific solutions to challenges that island economies are facing. And as I mentioned earlier, the mayor and I had the opportunity to travel recently to Palau, but then also to Guam to see some of the great work that our colleagues are doing. But Mayor, what I would like to ask you is the same question. What are some of the examples in your island of island-led sustainability solutions and bright spots that are helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, especially in the context of climate resilience and equity? So aloha, Mayor, over to you.
Aloha, and thank you for this opportunity to be here. What a opportunity we had last week. We attended the Our Oceans conference, and we made lemonade out of lemons when we got stuck in Guam, and Austin and his team showed us around, and just amazing to see everything that's happening all around the world. You know, when, as Celeste said, when I came into office, we made sustainability our top priority. And I think I should define sustainability in my eyes, because I think everybody has a different definition. For me, it's the ability to allow our kids to raise their kids here on this island. And I think when you come from island nations, we live in some of the most beautiful places in the world, whether you're in Guam, Palau, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. You know, we have great places, and we want our kids to be able to raise their kids. I mean, that's to me what sustainability looks like. And so if you use that as the base, we have to ask, what is it that we need? We need affordable housing, we need quality jobs, and we need an environment that is going to allow people to our kids to want to stay here. So when we came in, I made a commitment that in the first 100 days we would have a sustainability summit. In my mind, I figured that we'd have about 100 people attending that in a hotel. Of course, there was COVID, and I ended up having a heart attack in the first month. But on the 88th day, we did a virtual sustainability summit. And it was a good thing that I was out, because my team was able to partner with each other and partner with others to create this summit. And instead of having 100 people in a room, we had over 2,300 people registered to attend this conference, with 7 keynote speakers, 100 panelists. And you know, it's online at Naleo TV if anybody would like to see that. We handled 14 different subjects, and I think to date there's been about 30,000 people who have actually gone on and viewed what that is. When I look at the sustainability goals, I think number 17, the partnership, is probably one that doesn't get listed on a lot of people's goals, but it really is the most important one. How do you build these partnerships to get things going? And so we started with this summit. It was a great summit. We got a lot of international attention. In fact, because of the summit, we were able to host a TEDx in conjunction with COP26. And the first summit was about ideas. We have another one set for July, where we're going to look at actually implementing different rules, different policies to get things going. That being said, we have a lot of things that are actually happening here. In my trip to Palau, one of the things that I noticed was what was happening with food security. And Austin mentioned that, for Guam, that is one of our goals that we're really focusing on. In Hawaii Island, and I'm sure this is true for many other places, we import 90% of our food. And I mean, that's kind of a crazy thought to think that, we have about 200,000 people on our island now. 100 years ago, we had about 1 million people, and we were fully, feeding ourselves. We're 100% sustainable. So what do you do to do that? I'd like to focus on a couple of slides So I think, Laura, you have some of my slides up there. And talk about a group that's working on our island called the Ulu Co-op. So ulu, otherwise known as breadfruit, and I think we have breadfruit in all of our Micronesian in Guam. I'm pretty sure that in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, you also have breadfruit. Breadfruit is one of our staples that has been around for many years. We have traditions that talk about breadfruit. We have a legend, the god Ku transformed himself into an ulu tree to feed his family and spread the fruit throughout the Hawaii Islands. It's, as you can see on the slide, one of the highest yielding foods trees on earth. It can produce 100, 200 fruits per year. And ulu can be used for so many different things. You can eat it kind of like a potato. You can eat it kind of, well, we've had it as a dessert, and you can make flour out of it. So very, a whole bunch of different things that you can use. I just want to take what's happening with this Ulu Co-op. The Ulu Co-op is bringing together farmers who may be just growing ulu trees on their own land, on half an acre of land, bringing it to the Ulu Co-op and helping to sell that food. But I want to talk about the ulu, or the breadfruit, in relationship to the sustainability goals. So if we can switch to the next slide. All right. So if you look at ulu, it's something that people can grow on their own lands and help to prevent poverty. So that's the first sustainability goal. Of course, you're feeding people. So that's the second sustainability goal. You can prevent hunger. Ulu, having just had a heart attack, I found out is one of the healthiest foods that you can eat. So you have good health. Another sustainability goal was the ulu trees. They take in the water, they kind of fix it to the land. So you're actually helping to have cleaner water because of ulu. With the Ulu Co-op, we're showing that there are ways of having businesses that help, not only prevent us from taking in food from other places, importing food, we can have decent work. So people who in the Ulu Co-op don't have to do a lot of work to harvest the ulu fruit. When it's harvesting season, they can bring it in there, and so decent jobs. And it helps reduce inequities, another one of our sustainability goals. It helps to create sustainable cities and communities. You're bringing it back and reusing something from the land. It helps clean our climate. And as I said, with the partnerships that we have with our Ulu Co-op, it's another way of building partnerships. And so if you go to the last slide, this one fruit shows, we can move to the next slide. This one little fruit can meet many of our sustainability goals. Thinking about, ulu, thinking about the fruit and thinking about what's going on, our traditional cultures use foods like ulu, and they were so much healthier than what we have now. Unfortunately, as island nations and island locations, we've bought into it's always better someplace else. Well, always better someplace else for not only Hawaii, but I noticed this in Palau, meant things like eating a lot of Spam, eating a lot of things that corned beef hash, processed foods. And what I see happening in Palau, and I heard in Guam and other places, is the number of heart attacks have gone up. So going back to the indigenous foods and things like that is another way of getting us back on track. So we'll leave this this slide and just go back into off the slides there. Thanks. there's so many things that these sustainability goals mean to us. And one of the things as a mayor that I've been able to do is say, look, to all of my departments, moving forward, your budget is going to depend on how you can relate to the various sustainability goals. In other words, if you want funding for your departments or more funding than you currently get, you're going to have to convince me that it relates to a sustainability goal. In this way, we can protect ourselves from so many things. As island nations, we're the first ones to feel climate. And so we have things like hurricanes and tsunamis and weather and rising oceans and things like that, sea level change. Those impact us first. We are the canaries in the coal mine. And so we've been working on things like our energy. Currently, Hawaii Island makes 60% of its electricity by green methods, renewable energy, whether that be solar, geothermal, wind power. We're now looking at taking our wastewater and creating energy, our landfill and creating energy. There's so many different things that we can do that relate up to this that we're actually working on. I had recently asked our governor, with the war in Ukraine, to declare an energy emergency, not to change anything that people will do, although we've asked our citizenry to start thinking about how they use energy, but to speed up the process in which we are creating green energy. And some of the political processes, our PUC, our Public Utilities Commission, takes a long time. So we ask them to speed that up. On the other side, we're looking at what we can do. We've recently made all of our buses here on Hawaii Island free, so people aren't having to use a lot of gasoline. We're looking at transferring our fleet of vehicles from diesel fuel and gasoline to green energy, whether that be electric or hydrogen. We actually just got our first hydrogen bus. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're doing that we're looking for, and whether it be food, partnerships, sustainable tourism. We're working on areas where we have regenerative tourism, thinking about what we call vahipana, or sacred places, giving them a rest, working with our hotels and having them change out things like plastic straws and plastic forks to renewable kinds of things. So a lot of things that we're doing here on Hawaii Island that take these goals into consideration. And a whole bunch more. I'll be happy to answer questions in a few moments.
Mahalo nui, Mayor Roth. Thank you so much for that. And just a couple of things with Ulu, and as we heard from our colleague in Puerto Rico, Pana. I'm recalling Gordon Ramsay recently traveled to Hawaii and was blown away by breadfruit and actually cooked up a very delightful dish, apparently. So I think that this is truly universal. We're looking at health is a key SDG that we are committed to achieving, and your discussion about partnerships and really the intersection of all of these issues. Also, I really want to recognize the way that you are operationalizing the SDGs into really specific actions and connecting it to your budget, which is really remarkable and a great example that we can all learn from. I'd like to carry on with our panelists and now introduce Kate Brown, who's the Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership. And it's a collaborative and inclusive partnership that is open to entity committed to promoting action to build sustainable communities and islands and build resilience. Kate also serves as the co-secretariat to the Local 2030 Islands Network. And with that, Kate, I'll hand it over to you. Aloha.
Hello, thank you so much, Celeste. And I think we have slides, if Laura could share them. Just briefly. So yeah, it's a great pleasure. I just got off, I was just moderating a panel before this, which was focused on very similar examples that were shared from Guam and the island of Hawaii, but from Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, when we asked them the same questions, and there was an amazing amount of really exciting things being done, and we're looking a little bit at the gaps. And I think in terms of this plenary session, we're looking at what are the bright spots on this. And I think one of the biggest bright spots I see are really islands themselves, and it's this network that we've created together with many islands, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the fundamental underpinning of the network of Local 2030 Islands Network, which is what I'm going to talk about today, is that we see islands that are leading and are uniquely positioned to share their solutions, and that those solutions can be scaled globally. And that in working together as peers, as peer islands across the world, regardless of what the political status of your island is, we can offer some of that pathway to the bigger solution about how we actually achieve the SDGs and the climate change adaptation and resilience. And in terms of the Local 2030 Islands Network, we have built on decades of learning about things that are going to both work in an island context, but also function in a network. And so there are actually 4 principles to the Local 2030 Islands Network. And the first one, so Guam and Hawaii are both members of the network. And so we were hearing examples of their local implementation of the SDGs. And the network is helping to create a space for islands to share, to learn from one another, and also to present that this innovation more broadly into to the world. So our 4 principles, if islands join our network, that there's a focus on political leadership. And I think in the panel earlier, we heard as well the importance of that. And we can see also with Mayor Roth in terms of political leadership, helping to guide the process forward. And part of that is the commitment to local goal, developing your own local goals that connect to the SDGs. How is that being implemented in your own context? Secondly, that islands will create some type of public-private partnership or similar entity. In Hawaii, it's an entity called Hawaii Green Growth. And in Guam, it's Guam Green Growth, and other islands, it will be different things, but it's the entity that is helping to facilitate the process. And in our earlier panel, we also heard how important the process is, how it can go past political change, and how it's really important to make sure that everyone is involved that needs to be around the table. And then thirdly, importantly, the idea of measurement and accountability. So in Local 2030 Islands Network, all of the islands that are currently members have agreed that they're going to set up their own dashboard or similar mechanism to track progress on their local goals, the goals that they are committed to. And so we're excited about that. In Hawaii, Hawaii has a very advanced dashboard, and I think Laura will share that in the chat. And then we also see one in Guam. Last week in Palau, launched its own version of the Palau Local 2030 dashboard. And then we start to see that spread amongst many of the other islands that we work with. And then finally, that all of this leads to actual concrete action, that there is something actually changing in these islands. So every island that's currently a member of Local 2030 has agreed to those principles. If you want to see the membership letters of all of the islands that are members, I think we have 16 members at the moment, you can see them on our website. And it will also highlight what those islands particularly want to focus on with the network. In the next slide, the network is focused on a number of different approaches to supporting islands. One of them is a set of communities of practice, and we currently have 3 communities of practice which are open to anyone to join. Please check our website and for more information. But our first community of practice is focused on the first community of practice that we started, and with the support through all of these from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and NOAA is the Resilient and Clean Energy Systems Community of Practice. So that's really looking at renewable energy specifically. And then we have another one focused on data for climate resilience. That is, if you want to create your own dashboard or accountability measure, this is the right community of practice for you. It is helping to do that. It's supported by Hawaii Local 2030 Hub's data lead and ESRI, as well as NREL and NOAA. So that's I think a really excellent community of practice to join. And then last week in Palau, we launched a new community of practice, which is the Sustainable and Regenerative Tourism Community of Practice, which is really looking at the transformation in the tourism sector on sustainability. And we have some excellent champions who will be part of this network, along with the organizations that I've listed earlier. And if any of these, as I said, are on our website of islands2030.org. So I encourage people to check that out. And then finally, just in terms of our members, it's relatively diverse. We've only really started building our membership in the last year. And we just last week announced, and as you can see in this membership, it's very diverse in terms of types of islands, locations of islands. We have islands like Ireland, which is obviously part of Europe, but also just last week, Antigua and Barbuda and Trinidad and Tobago have joined, but we also have the British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and others from the Caribbean region, as well as some in the Pacific. And there's a lot of islands in the process of joining. So we believe that this network both will support this acceleration of learning around how we actually implement the SDGs following a very specific process, but in a locally and culturally appropriate way, as we've heard through this panel. And then secondly, that working together, we can start to transform the space for islands in the world. And I think those two things are really as important as each other. So both transformation at local level and together, and then how we use that to guide and transform the global conversation on climate and sustainability. Thanks, Celeste.
Mahalo, Kate. Thank you so much for that. And I also just want to note that when we were in Palau, there was a lot of excitement about the Micronesia Challenge and reinvigorating that with the 6 goals, and really how the Micronesia Challenge inspired the Caribbean Challenge. And the Caribbean Challenge subsequently inspired the Aloha Plus Challenge. And really the Global Island Partnership was instrumental in connecting all of this. And we often say that this is a song sung in rounds, and how islands are inspiring other islands to take action in a real peer-to-peer way, which is different than a top-down approach, absolutely, and through island values, shared island values. So thanks so much to you, Kate, and to GLISPA for all of your work. And I do want to continue on this thread now and really go back to our panelists. And I do note that we have some questions in the chat. I'm going to encourage our panelists to address those as they can. But one in particular, going back to this idea of measuring progress, back over to you, Austin. A question is, how can island economies promote accountability by increasing access to reliable data and measuring progress on their climate and sustainability goals? So if I could hand that over to you, Austin, that'd be great.
Thank you, Celeste. Well, one of the great benefits of joining the Local 2030 Islands Network was that we got to learn from Hawaii Green Growth about this thing called the dashboard. And so there's a way to in a public and transparent way to track all of the progress across the Sustainable Development Goals. In Hawaii's case, it's the Aloha Plus dashboard. For us, it's called the Guam Green Growth, or G3 dashboard, and I'll just put the link in the chat, and feel free to go around on the different tabs there. But basically, now that we've got those 100 members in our G3 working group representing all sectors of our society, we're making a lot of progress on the hundreds of goals and action items that we developed back in 2020. And it serves as a living document now that we can make adjustments, and we can also account for new opportunities that come up. Like, for example, I know a lot of us are thinking about the bipartisan infrastructure law that came about recently, and there's going to be lots of opportunities that are going to come up there that will help us advance the goals that we've identified across these sustainable development goals. So now we can take the progress on all of those actions and roll it up into our dashboard, that public and transparent mechanism for us to be tracking things. So if you go to our Guam Green Growth dashboard, you can just see some examples of the things that we are tracking. So it's not just environmental things, as we heard earlier today, that the sustainable development goals encompass way more than just environmental aspects. We have human society aspects, economic aspects. So in our healthy and prosperous community category of action, for example, we are measuring diverse things such as the number of farmers that we have, but also measures such as infant mortality, obesity rate, traffic fatalities. Now that we have access to all of the different government agencies, through our Guam Green Growth Initiative, it's actually a large public-private partnership. So we have directors of agencies and we have executive directors of nonprofits, and we've identified the data points of contacts from each of those. And so we're able to capture a lot of those different things across the dashboard. So it's a really diverse set of metrics, and we like to call our initiative now our island's most comprehensive public-private partnership ever created to achieve a sustainable future. And we're proud to put all of that information in the dashboard. And I think that that's a really exciting piece that anybody from around the island, or around the world, can see what our local actions look like and how we're contributing to that global sustainable future.
Thanks so much, Austin. That's very exciting. And also, I think Kate alluded to it earlier, the announcements recently of the partnership with Esri to help support this and really building off of Guam's leadership. So thank you so much for that. And Mayor, I'm going to actually turn back to you as well, because you've often talked about the importance of accountability and transparency in what we're doing. And also the whole idea of partnerships and bringing folks together to track progress. In Hawaii, what is pretty extraordinary is we have further localized this ability to track progress at the county level. But perhaps you could also speak to the question of increasing access to reliable data and measuring progress on our sustainability commitments.
Right. So thanks, Celeste. So we do have the state dashboard, and then each of our islands actually have their own little dashboards. And I think dashboards are important because you accomplish what you measure. And you know, as a mayor, there's a lot of things that are driving, you know, forces. Everybody has different issues, but you need something to kind of bring you back to center. And so we try to look at things like how much electricity that we're making, renewable energy that we're making. So I can tell you right now we're about 60%. We want to be at 100%. We believe we can be there in the next 5 years. We have a goal of 2045, but we want to get there quicker. We're looking at things like housing. Housing is really important for us. And so we're tracking the number of housing units we need. We know that we need 10,000 by 2025. That's affordable housing, housing that, you know, our local families can live in. When we came in, we knew that we had somewhere around 1,300 in the pipeline. We now have over 5,500 in the pipeline. By having those numbers accessible, you know how much you need to push our permitting system on the housing. We're able to see how many permits were being issued a month when we came in, and you know, that was about 269 a month. Now we're at 544 a month. So we've doubled that. Having those dashboards out there tells us this is where we need to push. You know, the big thing that we're looking at, we talked about food sustainability. We are producing 10%. We want to be at 20% in the next couple of years. And so how do you do that? You need to give support to our local farmers. I saw that one of the questions in there had to do with composting. One of the projects we have is people who, we have green waste. That green waste is made into compost. We give that compost away. Right now, we're giving about 40,000 tons of mulch away a year to people to do farming at their homes, for businesses to have farming efforts. So having that ability to measure what's going on tells you where you need to put the extra resources into, where you need to push. And if you don't have it, it just becomes one of the hundreds of other issues that are out there. And so I think that's the real, value of having the dashboards.
Thanks so much, Mayor Roth, and absolutely thanks also for addressing the question in the chat about the composting. I think there's so many examples that are happening underway. One thing that came to mind as well for us in Hawaii was a student-led process of composting their lunch waste, and actually tracking the data on a whiteboard for about 2 years until we were able to work with them to see how we could actually help them track their progress on the dashboard. And what was really remarkable about that, we found, is also our younger generation, our youth that are really leaders in this. And you've been so such a passionate speaker about also youth engagement, Mayor, that kids growing up in an island actually have this inherent understanding of the stewardship that's needed and the connection from ridge to reef, and actually being able to see how their effort in their lunchroom was connected to the statewide goals and the global goals was actually very remarkable. Kate, I'm just going to ask you to make a couple comments about the importance of measuring progress, but then I do want to give all of our panelists an opportunity to provide some reflections too. So Kate, anything additional that you want to add on measuring progress?
Yeah, I think I worked a lot before working in GLISPA with small island developing states, particularly in the Pacific, who are reporting to the UN through things like their voluntary national reviews, which they do in a periodic basis. And I think what to me is really exciting about the measuring progress side of things is that it moves that process, which happens, but actually has no real use outside of that very specific focus as a report to the UN, into something that citizens of that island can actually see how their island is progressing on those global goals, rather than a report that goes to the UN. It kind of, to me, really democratizes the SDGs and makes it really local. And I think the measuring progress side, there's a lot of resources that's going into measuring all sorts of things. I think having a dashboard and this accountability to the local population is a key and critical change. And I just wanted to touch also on there's a question about local and island NGO efforts. And I think as GLISPA is actually a member of Hawaii's Hawaii Green Growth and that partnership, and has been involved in that since about 2011. So we have a long history with that and observing it. And I think what we see both in Hawaii, and we're also involved with Guam, is enormous effort to have everyone at the table. So to have the NGOs at the table, even if you don't agree, and sometimes it's government agencies that don't agree with each other on goals, bringing people around a table and having a conversation to try and look at how you're actually going to both set those local goals and implement them is, to me, one of the game changers and bright spots. And the real important thing here is to have a facilitating institution who isn't an advocate, but is in some ways the trusted, as a trusted place. And that's what we see with the institutions that play that role. It's one of the reasons why one of the principles of the Local 2030 Islands Network is about the public-private partnership, because this is not going to work if it's just one sector alone, and it has to have the engagement of everyone. And the process, as we heard also in the earlier panel, is critically important. So the process for SDGs is important. The process for measuring and accountability is important. And people need to feel that what is being presented to them is actually something real. And one of the reasons why we also have the tangible and concrete projects is that a lot of what we do can feel like we're talking a lot and we're measuring things, and there's lots of stuff on websites and reports, but I think it's how you make things tangible to the people in these places. And I think all of the examples we've heard today have really done a great job of going between both a very strategic long-term perspective, which can feel not tangible, to having some very tangible things that people can touch in their local communities and feel that they're part of the process. So I think those things are really important. And that's, I think, some of the magic of what some of these islands are doing.
Thanks so much, Kate. And I recognize we only have a couple minutes left, but I did want to give our panelists a time to provide some final reflections just on the importance of island leadership and leading the way on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Mayor, I'm actually going to start with you. You've often talked about being intentional. Maybe you could just share your thoughts about that with regards to the SDGs and the challenge ahead of us.
Well, like I said, and thank you, what a great opportunity to be on this panel with such great people. We are in a time in history where things are kind of crazy. And if we don't intentionally act on things, we're going to keep on going in the direction that we're going. Our planet is in crisis. And so we have to intentionally take steps to protect our islands, protect, our country, protect our world. As we look around at the things that are happening just with the climate, if you don't act intentionally, then bad things can happen. And I'm going to take a word that you've coined called globally. We need to think locally, but act globally. And part of that comes to one of the questions about relationships and that we had with other places. We can't do this by ourselves. We need Guam, we need New Zealand, we need Puerto Rico, we need the Virgin Islands. We need everybody working together to make a better future for all of us. And it's easy sometimes just to keep on doing the easy things, eating the spam, the canned foods and things like that. But the health of our islands, the health of our world depends on us all intentionally thinking about how we can do that. And the SDGs are really the model, the guide to use to get there. So again, just want to thank you guys for allowing me to be part of this. I'm, just a little mayor from Hawaii County, but it's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for your leadership, Mayor Roth. Austin, some quick reflections.
I think that there are so many great ideas that we're hearing in this panel about local action, global impact, acting globally, as well as the mayor just said. The theme that we were talking about just a couple weeks ago at our University of Guam conference on island sustainability is that last year we talked about islands are rising, and then we said this year, oh, sorry about that, it's time to wake up here in Guam. Let me get that.
So maybe while Austin goes and tends to his keiki, his children, and getting them out of bed, Kate, in the interest of time, Austin, maybe I'll just hand it over to Kate to provide some final reflections as we close the call.
Sorry.
Well, I think my final, because I don't want Mayor Roth to have the only made up word, so I'm going to have a word too, which is that a lot of this, a lot of what we're doing is really in the idea of co-opetition. So it's how we inspire each other to do more. And for us, co-opetition is cooperative competition. So there will be a time, I think, when Hawaii and Guam are in deep competition with their dashboards, looking at how they're actually achieving things. But at the same time, we still have a space where we can cooperate and share our island values, our island wisdom, and our island leadership with the rest of the world. So I really encourage Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands to engage with us on this.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for all of the work that you do each and every day to support sustainability and build more climate resilient futures for our communities. I also want to just thank the conference organizers for this great opportunity to share out island solutions. So with that, this concludes the panel. Thank you. Mahalo nui loa.